Casey, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We wanted to get your take on some of the latest plans and projects happening at the planning department and the planning board.
Thanks, Bridget. Great to be here.
We're here in your office, and we wanted to sort of go down a rundown of projects and plans, and we wanted to start with the bicycle master plan. Kicked off some of its first meetings, and there's a lot of energy behind it. What's your take on this exciting plan?
Well, I keep saying this is going to be the best bike plan ever written, and the staff keeps looking at me like I'm crazy. But what I mean by best bike plan ever is not necessarily that we're going to have the most miles of bike lanes or bike paths or sharrows or bike facilities, but that we're going to have the most sophisticated analysis ever done for a bike plan to really figure out where we can make some investments with the limited amount of resources that are available to make bicycling more appealing, safe, and attractive to more people. And that includes people who don't think of themselves as the sort of folks who would consider biking to work today, especially in a place like Montgomery County. It was developed a very suburban pattern of transportation network, and the roads that were designed with cars in mind and not so much with walking and biking as something they were designed to provide access to. So I think this is going to be a really exciting exercise because it challenges us to use some of the tools that we have, the data we have, that ordinarily would be used for major infrastructure projects like new highways, new transit systems, and apply them to bicycling. And that's why I think this is going to be the best bike plan ever written, because those are the types of analytical tools and techniques that are not usually used for bicycling and pedestrian projects.
I know the planners have sort of shown the community aspirational images or videos of what Western Europe is doing in terms of bicycling, or even South America. Do you think we could one day get there?
Well, I think if you see what has happened in the District of Columbia, in Arlington, Alexandria, and even in a limited way in Montgomery County, the potential is there. We've got the first cycle track in the county. That's a facility that's a little bit like a bike lane, but it has more physical separation with a barrier, a curb, or bollards between the space for the bikes and other kinds of traffic like cars or even pedestrians. We've got one in White Flint now. That's the first one that's been tried here. They're being used in the district with a lot of success. And so some of those types of infrastructure that had never been used around here before, we're seeing that when we introduce it on a limited basis, that it's effective. And there's no reason why we can't do some of the things that have been done in Europe or New York City or some places that are more citified or urban than what we're used to seeing here.
You've said publicly that you sort of got here by riding around downtown Silver Spring, got to this position as chair. What would you say to somebody who's afraid to get on two wheels in the county?
I don't blame people for being hesitant. I have a 15-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter, and I don't want to put them in danger. And I want them to be able to feel as kids that they are free to go explore the neighborhood on foot or on bicycle or on skateboards, or you want to be able to turn your kids loose and let them explore the world around them. And that's hard to do right now in many parts of the county. We need to work on that. But I think that people also need to understand that it's not as dangerous maybe as they think, that if you plan it out and you practice some basic techniques for biking safely, that's something I think that's within the reach of most adults and can be done safely. And the other thing, of course, is that there's danger to sitting on the couch. There's danger to leading a life that's behind the wheel of a car. heart disease, lack of exercise, that can be just as deadly as anything that a traffic accident can do to you. So there's risk, and it's real, but we should also keep that risk in context and remember that there's real benefit to being physically active, and even though it's not for everybody, it's probably something that a lot of people would find more accessible than they think if they give it a try.
Related to the bike plan, but different, the Capital Bike Share program recently celebrated a milestone, the 5th anniversary. What are your thoughts on how that program is doing in the county?
I think the most amazing thing about bike share is that nationally, if you take all the bike share systems, Washington, D.C. area, including Montgomery County, Arlington, Alexandria, and you throw in New York City and some of the other parts of the country that have tried it, there have been over 10 million rides on bike sharing systems really since they started taking off just a few years ago, and 0 fatalities attributed to bike share, despite the fact that bike share systems do not provide helmets. And so that goes to the point I made a second ago, which is, yes, there's risk, you can hurt yourself, but I think that a lot of people overestimate the risk of riding a bike, and with bike share in particular, I think that we've seen that it's actually very safe. Those bikes are designed not to be ridden fast, but to take your time and make short trips. And I find that when I'm on a bike share bike, that people give you some room. They see you coming, you're upright, they're very visible, and typically you're riding them in a place where the traffic is not that fast, because they're in the more congested, downtown, more central business district type areas, and they actually tend to be more visible and safer than people think. I'm glad to see that we have a long way to go with bike share in Montgomery County as far as adoption and usage is concerned, and we still need to build out the network and put stations in more locations where people find them convenient to use. But I know that usage has actually exceeded the initial projections, so that's very encouraging. To be honest with you, when Valerie Irvin, who used to be on the county council, first started pushing this idea around 2008, I was on the board of the Washington Area Bicycles Association, and I was very reluctant to get behind a push for bike share in Montgomery County, because I was afraid that if it didn't work, that people would take that as evidence that there's not a lot of interest in bicycling generally. And it turned out that bike share has worked much better than anybody really reasonably expected in D.C. and Montgomery and some of these other jurisdictions. And I think it's a sign that if you provide the opportunities, part of that's going to be better infrastructure, but if you provide things like bike share, there are people who will take you up on it.
I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about White Flint 2, a plan that's focused on connectivity, building off of the success of the White Flint 1 sector plan. There's also some challenges with this plan as well. Any thoughts on that right now as it's in its early stages?
We think that there are some opportunities, some interest from developers in taking advantage of really strong interest in being close to the core, being close to existing centers of activity, not just the immediate area of White Flint, but Rockville and Bethesda, and in that sort of lower 270 corridor. I think the challenges will be making sure that the transportation plan, it's not just about roads, not just about transit, but making sure that it's walkable, bikeable, and that those other options like transit are really realistically accessible, and that we have the capacity to provide the kind of service that's necessary to make that plan work from a mobility point of view. And of course, the other thing that we've seen all over the county in the last year or so is a lot more attention to school capacity. And I know that the school clusters in that part of the county, Walter Johnson and the surrounding area, have really, a lot of folks are concerned about crowding in the schools, and that's something I'm concerned about it too. I have a daughter who goes to Woodland Elementary School. It's one of the elementary schools with the most portables in the county, and she's in a portable every single day. So I think that we have a lot of work to do to make sure we're working with the school system to plan for school capacity to match the pace of new development.
Another plan close by geographically and also dealing with the school issues, the Rock Spring Master Plan as well.
Yeah, same set of issues about schools. With Rock Spring, I think that there are some opportunities, but there's also a real sense of urgency because Marriott has made it clear that they want to be in a place that's more urban, that has more activity going on, a better mix of uses and amenities, because that's what their employees want. I think that plan is not going to be about trying to persuade Marriott to stay there, but it's about trying to reorient that office park, this sort of suburban office campus environment, to something that's more appealing to employers and employees to make that a place they want to be. If that area becomes unappealing, that becomes a real economic development issue and issue for the tax base in the county. And for the surrounding neighborhoods, it's not good if they're looking at a lot of vacancies and a dead space right in the middle of their community. So I think that with Rock Spring, it's an even more pressing issue to figure out how to reorient that and reimagine it for the future.
Regarding economic development, since you've become chair, you've really stressed upon staff to consider economic development opportunities and challenges as they write these plans and come up with recommendations. That's a little bit of a shift from what the agency has been used to. Are you seeing that shift play out, and can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that the staff has been responsive to that. I think the people here understand that our task is less about just managing growth, and it's about making sure that we have the kind of economic opportunities, job creation that are necessary to make sure we can be prosperous and that people have the quality of life that requires a certain level of resources, both in the form of tax base for public services and also incomes that support the kind of lifestyle that we're used to in Montgomery County and that can help us meet the challenges that we're facing. And really those are very different than they were even as recently as 15 or 20 years ago. I think that for the most part there's an emerging consensus on this point in the community, among our elected officials, as well as within this building, but obviously it's tough to recognize the need for change and to confront that. And really, I think that Montgomery County has so many assets. Even though it does have challenges it didn't have before, it still has a lot of underlying strength. We have a highly educated workforce. We have proximity to the nation's capital. These are things that other jurisdictions would really, really give almost anything to have even a fraction of the assets we have. But really, the enemy is complacency. We've got to take this seriously and get ahead of some of these issues before they become really big problems. And I think that we can do that. But that's the task that we have to confront.
The board has a really busy fall, mainly with work sessions from the plans that were started a year or a year and a half ago. Bethesda, Westbard, Littonsville, Montgomery Village. Any comments on any of those and how they're progressing through?
Well, Bethesda is a great success story, but I would argue that in some ways Bethesda has succeeded despite itself. The level of quality of design and architecture in some cases, to be honest, has not been where we'd like it to be. And we think that Bethesda is perhaps the best example of an urban, transit-oriented place in the county that's been economically vibrant. It's attracted employers, attracted a lot of residents. People want to live there and be there. There's a lot of stuff to do. But if Bethesda is going to be successful in the future, it won't be enough to just keep doing more of the same. And I saw in the paper recently that Victor Hoskins, who has worked as the Director of Economic Development in, I believe, Fairfax District, Prince George's County, now he's in Arlington. And so he's been around the block, almost literally and figuratively. And he was quoted as saying, you know, Arlington has got to avoid resting on its laurels because it's viewed as tremendously cutting-edge jurisdiction in transit-oriented development and taking advantage of the Orange Line. But he said that's not going to be enough for us in the future. And I think that's same thing applies here, that we have been successful, we've done some things very well, but we have to recognize that we have to be dynamic and innovative if we're going to continue to repeat that success.
Anything else on any other plans? Westbard, Montgomery Village, Littonsville?
Well, I think you know, Montgomery Village is really a story of community that was successful for several decades, was well planned, but is in need of revitalization. And again, there are lots of folks in Montgomery Village who love their community, and while many of them do accept the need for change, it's still hard. And I think that we're optimistic that we're going to be able to create a plan that can be realized, that is economically feasible, and will also maintain and improve the quality of life in Montgomery Village. It's going to be different. The golf course was such a central feature of that community for so long that's a big change. But I think that we're seeing that the community realizes that it's a new day, and that there has to be a rethinking of what the community is going to look like in the next 4 or 5 decades.
In Littonsville, the fact that the Purple Line has been saved, is that saving this plan, do you think?
We certainly wouldn't have undertaken a Littonsville plan if not for the Purple Line, and that is the major driver, the opportunity to maybe shift some of the industrial uses to a wider mix of retail, maybe some infill residential. I don't think that Littonsville is going to be fundamentally transformed. That's a place that, you know, we understand that there's a lot of qualities of that communities that can and should survive the Purple Line. And there's a lot of small businesses that have established themselves there, and we don't want to interfere with that. But we want to take advantage of the Purple Line as an opportunity to expand the range of amenities, local serving retail there, and also provide a limited amount of new, you know, residential housing types and opportunities for people who want to live near the Purple Line, live near downtown Silver Spring, have access to Bethesda. All those things are, I think, going to be good for the existing residents and also some new people as well.
Could you give us your thoughts on the Westbard sector plan? The public hearing happened, and that's moving through with work sessions. Any thoughts on that plan?
That's not a transit-oriented plan. And I think it's important to recognize that it's a different situation than Bethesda or even a place like Littonsville. Littonsville is a smaller scale neighborhood, but it will be accessible to a major transit service with Purple Line. Westbard is really about a shopping center that was built, I think, almost 50 years ago, surrounded by acres of surface parking, and there's an opportunity there to upgrade the retail and provided a limited amount of infill. But we understand that this is not an urban location, it's not Bethesda or Silver Spring, but that nonetheless it's in need of some sprucing up. And I think that some limited redevelopment there is going to provide services that people like. I think that's a community that's particularly concerned about change and the discomfort of, accepting something that's different. That's apparent. But I think that when it's all said and done, that we'll be able to facilitate something there that people feel is both in scale with the existing communities, surrounding residential neighborhoods, and also provides the kind of retail offering that you would expect in a community like that.
As I mentioned, the agenda is very full, fall and winter for the board. What sort of message does that send to the community in terms of the amount of work that's coming out of what the board is doing, what the department is doing?
Well, we're busy, but I think that people need to understand that the total amount of development that's happened in the last few years has actually been pretty limited. The 25-year average is we get about 3,200 housing units permitted for occupancy a year on average. Coming out of the recession, the trough around 2007, 2008 was just over 1,000 units, which was nowhere near what we'd need just to meet the base of what you would expect from background levels of population growth. Coming out of the recession, we recently have been around 3,000, maybe even a little over 3,200 last year, but we actually have some catching up to do as far as delivering housing units are concerned. Now, I think a lot of people have the perception that development has been going great guns because they see cranes in places like Wheaton with the Exchange project, the Safeway. They see a lot of development activity in White Flint with Pike and Rose and North Bethesda Market, and they forget that in the context of the whole county with over 1 million people, that the number of new units that have been produced is actually pretty modest. We have seen a lot of interest in redevelopment, especially in places like Bethesda. Just over the last few months, we've had more developers approaching our staff and saying, we're getting ready to file an application, we want to talk to you about new projects. I think that that's encouraging because it speaks to the underlying strength of our economy. Some of those advantages I talked about our workforce is highly skilled, well educated, and people still want to be in the DC region and in Montgomery County. So that's a sign of some factors that protect our health economically, even when their national economy has its ups and downs.
Well, Casey, we want to thank you for spending time with us, talking about some of the latest plans and projects, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Bridget.